The first major college football 25 patch is here, and I'm going to be going over every last thing that it fixed in this video. We're starting off with the gameplay section. It says they've included 8 new shotgun formations to a total of 35 teams. Those are going to be listed here, and I'm not going to go through all of that, but what it lets me know is throughout the year, they're going to be willing to update different playbooks, different jerseys if we see it on the field, so that's super exciting just to know what we have coming forward. By the way, there's like 111 major bullet points on this. There is a ton in this patch. I mean, I've never seen an update like this before. The next thing is tuning and logic enhancements to pursuit angles, and that is a huge one for number 2. If you've noticed, your defenders don't normally make the right pursuit angle when trying to go for a tackle. I think EA really wants the players with high pursuit to make those tackles and plays, but the lower pursuit ones you might have to click on and do yourself. There's also going to be a lot of dev notes on here that are like, we will monitor the feedback on how this change impacts gameplay, and based on the results, they can update it in future title updates. So I like how active they're being with this game so far. The next thing is reduced frequency of broken tackles from trailing defenders. That happens a lot. I've had some plays where like 5 times in a row, you just break the same tackle with the same animation. And some of this stuff will be more vague. It looks like fixed various instances of rare broken play bugs. I'm sure that happens. Fixed an issue where certain formations had offensive players aligned too wide when on the near or far hash. I've had some formations where it looked a little off, so maybe that's true. That's a bug that's in there. Fixed an issue where you couldn't use 4-2-5 or 3-3-5 formations in custom playbooks. So they're getting all the tiny bugs too, along with like the major things. I'm gonna be super excited and geek out once we get to the Dynasty section, but the gameplay's important too. I still think gameplay's the strongest part about college football 25. They fixed an issue where single back formations would assign blah blah blah. Fixed an issue where spiking the ball in online modes was not working. I have never seen that happen either. Fixed an issue so a speed option running back will follow the quarterback longer. I have had that happen before, so that means whenever you run the speed option now, your halfback should be breaking to the sidelines instead of cutting back up the middle. Most of these gameplay ones might be things that you didn't even notice, but there are a lot. Adjusted AI quarterback behavior on shot plays to make more lob throws versus bullet passes. I didn't know the computer was doing that. They've adjusted behavior to be less aggressive based on awareness. Adjusted offensive line behavior. Okay, I might need to just get to Dynasty. There's some stuff in here that it just doesn't matter. But maybe it does. Maybe I need to break it down more because I read the second half of that sentence and it says resulting in less illegal man downfield penalties during RPO plays, and I have experienced that. So I'm glad that they're looking at it. For best chances at success, make sure you press on the icon of which receiver you want to throw to before the running back receives the ball. That makes sense. If you're delayed with it, there's going to be a penalty. And I love all the dev notes throughout this whole thing because it's going to give you tips on what you need to be doing to counter some of these issues. There's definitely been a lot of bugs that aren't actually bugs. It's just been skill issues from people complaining. So they have to leave a couple notes. Adjusted the DB's ability to more effectively shed blocks on the perimeter. Okay. Increased the speed penalty for running out of stamina during the play. QB scrambles behind the line of scrimmage will lose stamina at a faster rate. Fixed an exploit where players would leave a quarterback contained player unblocked and run around them. And all of this stuff seems good. It seems like it's going to be things that are going to help the defense, since defense has seemed almost impossible in some modes. We will make further improvements to quarterback contains in a future title update. They're just letting us know because it is a little bit broken, that they're still working on that. You don't want to put it out if it's not fully ready. And we're almost done with the gameplay stuff. I guess abilities would also kind of fall under that category. I know they have a lot in Road to Glory and Dynasty coming up. I mean, I've counted them all. Increase the reward for players receiving shading inside. Okay, so if you shade a certain way, now you're going to be punished for it unless you guess right. And that's important. That's going to help your defense if you can guess correctly on what type of routes they're running on the field, but you're also going to be punished more if you just shade the same way every time. Adjusted false start chances when you make pre-play adjustments. That is something I can talk about. It happens all the time, and I'm glad that they've adjusted it. They've also fixed an issue where run-fit defenders were not responding as effectively to Wildcat run plays. No! Wildcat has been patched. It's taken like a month. No! Made an adjustment to Wildcat unbalanced motion zone play, so pretty much Wildcat's no longer going to be as amazing as it has been. They've also reduced the effectiveness of multiple laterals in a single play. I have seen some crazy clips of like 5 or 10 laterals, so that makes sense, especially for like that 3v3 mode in Ultimate Team. I've not played it, but I've seen clips from it. Adjusted the thresholds required to receive the most effective juke and spin moves. Interesting. I'm not sure if we're getting a Judkins patch or not. I'm sure that should be in here eventually. Adjusted press animations to be more of an effective counter to takeoff ability. And that patch is Barry and Brown. My favorite strategy of just throwing a streak down the field to my 98 speed receiver with takeoff has been patched. Okay, there needed to be a counter to that though. It was a bit too easy. They've also updated pass protection mechanic to only include the running back in the protection. if they're already on a block or a block and release assignment. And I haven't really looked into the protections at all, so I can't talk much about that, but we've gotten to the abilities section, and I don't think it's that deep. Yeah, Dynasty is right after it. Alright, updated the coloring of Platinum tier abilities to further distinct the look versus Silver abilities. I'm so glad they've done that, actually, because I've been like squinting at my monitor trying to tell the difference between Silver and Platinum, so that was needed. They needed that. Rebalance the Gold and Platinum tiers of juke and spin abilities like the 360 and sidestep. Ollie Gordon, Judkins, both of them have been patched with this. I've experienced both in some online games, the spin one especially, and I'm so glad that they have addressed it. It's still going to be good, I'm sure, but not as crazy it has been. You literally couldn't tackle him. You'd have like 5 of your defenders just freeze. So with that and the pursuit angles fixed, I'm interested to see how defense plays. Rebalance the Platinum tier of the extender ability, which includes not firing on QB design run plays. I guess that's just a small little thing. But I'm also trying to read all of these and get through the video kind of quick. I don't want to stall you all and talk about stuff too long, so I might skip over some important updates. I don't know. Slightly rebalance the effectiveness of the Gold and Platinum tiers of the quick jump ability. I don't even know what this is. They did say they've made adjustments to the tier levels found on the Texas front seven though, and if you've played against Texas's defense, you would know they were getting in a ton of pressure, almost like Michigan too, so I'm curious to see what that does. But now we're on to the important stuff. Dynasty's coming up, Road to Glory, and I hope Team Builder's also addressed. I can't remember if it is. Okay, first thing is they fixed an issue where players were unable to have more than 20 created coaches at one time in an online Dynasty league. I have not experienced that personally, but I did see a lot of complaints about it. So I'm glad they addressed it, and I will say there were a lot of bugs in this game that I didn't think would be there on launch. I only saw the gameplay up until we got early access like a week before we could drop videos on it, and the gameplay was great, but I didn't know of all the things in the menus. And I was taken back a little bit by some of the things, but that's why I'm so happy they've put out this big first patch, because I think they're about to address a lot of it. They've made various fixes around score summaries and box scores. You could glitch out and have two different scores, like your score on the box score versus what happened in game was different, so they fixed that bug. And there's also various fixes for news stories. I saw someone that won a game like 40-0, and it mentioned overtime, so I'm glad that they're addressing that as well. They've introduced a new playoff bracket screen. I'm going to be curious for what that looks like. And then they've updated the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry data. That must have been wrong or something. Next up, we've discovered that FCS schools were secretly using professional players and passing them off as collegiate players, gave them sanctions, and ensured they are now using properly rated players. That is a little bit of a joke, I would assume, and that's why maybe they were performing so well whenever you played them in Dynasty. They have noted though, and I'm sure this will be on a couple other changes, for this change to go into effect, you'll need to create a new dynasty, and that makes sense because whenever you start a dynasty, you have to select a certain roster, so they can't just change up the FCS schools rosters midway through your dynasty file. I'm sure there's going to be complaints about that. There always are going to be like the littlest complaints about things, but that makes like sense from a file perspective. And they have fixed an issue where wear and tear did not recover for FCS teams. That makes so much sense. I played against an FCS school in my online dynasty with a couple of my friends. It's not like for content or anything, but the UGF Pandas were literally getting injured every single play. So I'm glad that they've done that. I was noticing an injury timeout after everything. And they've also reduced dynamic attendance penalties for playing FCS teams. Okay, that's interesting. So far, I've really liked how attendance works in the games. If you're using a bad school, that stadium is nowhere near full. It also takes a while to fill it up. And they've increased the attendance for rivalry games as well. That makes sense. Next up, they've retuned toughest places to play formula to reduce the impact of large stadiums have on toughest place to play and increase the value of filling the stadium when winning games at home historically. So I guess there was some tuning with that as well. And I like the changes they made here because it reduced the impact of raw crowd size. You would notice that certain programs with huge stadiums were like staying up top, even if they had like an 0-12 season. So now it's more based off of your win rates and your attendance rate over that time. They've changed the right-hand panel and stadium atmosphere grade on my school screen to accurately reflect the toughest places to play. That must have been inaccurate. And they've increased the accumulation of pride stickers. I didn't know that was an issue, but I also haven't used schools like Ohio State or Florida State. Something's been done with the transfer stuff. They've reduced the chance to transfer penalty for players rated below 90 overall, so I guess players are going to transfer even less. And this might be just me, but I haven't had a major issue with transfers unless it's with the playing style. We'll see how that works once it's in effect. They've updated the coach talents on Wyoming's offensive coordinator. Okay, this did not need its own bullet point, but I guess they do have to list it all off. This is not major compared to some of the other things. For this change to go into effect, you'll need to create a new dynasty. It looks like they've mentioned defensive schemes and playbooks for the following teams have been updated. So again, they're making changes throughout the year based on what colleges tell them to do, based off what teams are using for this change to go effect. Again, start a new dynasty. That makes sense. They're not going to change the playbooks in your old files. So if you see your school on here, that's wonderful. I'm not reading them all off. They've updated your coach's playbook in the schemes and playbook screen. It'll now update your team's scheme and should be reflected in team needs. I've noticed that issue happening before. I'm glad they addressed it. They fixed an issue where offensive linemen would appear in the preseason Heisman watch in future seasons. I have not seen that, but that is kind of funny. One thing I have seen though is this next bullet point, and it was the Heisman watch logic, and it just had to do with the receiving touchdowns. Way too many receivers were winning Heisman, so they've updated it to reduce the value of receiving touchdowns. Now they're touching on recruiting, and this worries me a little bit. I'm pretty happy with how recruiting works, but there were a couple things that needed to be fixed, like the scheduling bug. Dev notes are saying our primary goals for this update were to remove most of the recruiting strategies that were discovered during early access and to smooth out the pain points our players were reporting. Oh boy, I might have to learn recruiting all over again, find some new strategies. Recruiting is a delicate balance as we want to try to make things as realistic as possible, while also allowing players to live out their football fantasies. So with that in mind, we decided to introduce additional recruiting logic and balance changes. They have fixed an issue where teams were pursuing too many quarterbacks in high school recruiting. That's a great thing. I saw like Michigan got 6 quarterbacks in one of my files. I was very confused. But another thing that's been happening is there's a lot of unrecruited 4 and 5 stars. I'd say it's more 4 stars. 5 stars are pretty rare, or you just can't pursue them. And they've reduced that number because there were a lot of them. That means it's going to be harder to take over these small schools. I'm actually excited now because it was taking me about the same amount of time to rebuild any program. Increase the number of players that AI will pursue at one time. So that's also going to make recruiting more difficult. And we have another dev note right here. The above changes strive to decrease the number of players that go unrecruited, like I'm saying, while also slightly reducing how aggressive the AI could be with those recruits once they start to recruit them. That means maybe schools won't put as many points on them as they are. I'm not sure. We'll see how this all plays out. Their goal is to deliver a fun but balanced recruiting experience that feels rewarding to all players. We will monitor the impacts these changes have on the overall recruiting experience and continue to adjust as needed. Well, the only real way to know what impact that has on Dynasty is to actually play through it. Here are the visits though. This is the section we need. This was my biggest complaint. Of course, it's the first bullet point addressed. Fixed an issue where you couldn't schedule recruits for visits in certain situations. If you didn't know, they have to be in the top 5 stage to schedule them for a visit, but there were certain players you just couldn't do it for. It was blocked off, so I'm glad they addressed it. They also fixed an issue where a visit remained scheduled even if a recruit was removed from a board I didn't know that was in. They fixed an issue where the allowed number of visits scheduled for a week not exceeding 4, and that's definitely happened to me. I remember reading it in the Dynasty deep dive, but then I was able to schedule like 5 or 6 prospects for the same game, so it is going to be 4 as a cap. They've tuned visit influence effects as well. They removed initial influence when scheduling a visit. I don't like that. I was noticing you'd get a little bit of an influence boost every time you scheduled a visit. They've also increased disparity between winning and losing a game during a visit. That makes it even more crucial that if you bring in a player, they have to win. And they've tuned the logic for game stakes to better account for ranked teams. Interesting. That's probably needed too. I've definitely noticed like I could be playing against 1 in 7 schools and I'd be getting a huge bonus if I beat them even though I'm ranked higher. So they probably had to tune that a little bit. They've increased the penalty for choosing a visit activity that the team does not have a high grade in or the player's not interested in. So you want to select something that's one of the player's 3 motivations and that your school has a high grade in. I will say I've fat fingered some pitches though that I didn't want on a certain school grade, so I have to be more careful now. SuperSim is the next section. There were some bugs in here. We'll see if they got to them. Increased handoff rate for simulated RPOs to increase the number of running plays across the country, especially for teams with a lot of RPOs in their playbook. I would have never known that was even a thing. There's also been various tuning fixes to increase the gap between good and bad team/players. That was needed. SuperSim, especially Sim as well on the menus, you could tell that there's certain teams winning games that just shouldn't be. Now personally, I think it's more based on the team overall calculations just being incorrect. I didn't see anything in this article about that. So maybe they'll address it in the future, but I have noticed that team overalls just aren't calculating correctly. Teams that are a 76 and an 89 on paper have about the same roster sometimes. Another thing I didn't see anything on the Dynasty about that I was hoping would be fixed is player numbers. I don't think you're going to be able to change player numbers. I didn't see it anywhere throughout here. So that's unfortunate because you should be able to do it for at least custom recruits. We're going to continue to monitor the simulation results to ensure that teams and players are performing within expected ranges, including reducing frequency of upsets based on preseason projections and expected win totals. It's very nice to know that the devs are looking out and seeing everything that people are complaining about. I mean, they're addressing a lot of it. Besides the player numbers, maybe there's something built into the engine that they just can't change with it, because you should be able to change the player numbers of generated recruits. It is a small thing. There are fixes for it, and it might might be frustrating to do, but I saw this fix for changing your players' numbers when it won't let you, so you can try this out and see if it works. The last thing you want to do is not be able to change the number of a 5-star recruit that's numbered incorrectly, so I understand the complaints there. The polls, there's increased loss penalty for schools with more than one loss. That was needed. And I've seen some funky polls, but most of mine in videos have been pretty normal, so I think it's just a lot more people are playing the game. Some results are going to look weirder than others. They've increased the weighing of conference prestige in the poll calculation. I'm not sure how needed that was. I'm seeing like 7-5, 8-4 SEC schools being in the top 15. I do like this though. They've reduced the variance in the college football poll logic versus media and coaches, because if you check out the media and coaches, even if it doesn't matter for selecting the playoff seeds, the media and coaches at the end of the season in Dynasty have been pretty accurate. They're also basing this off of a system that's never been tested before. The 12-team playoff is happening in this game before we see how the rankings play out in real life, so that's probably difficult to do. Dev note, as with the other systems mentioned above, we will continue to monitor the poll system to ensure it strikes a balance between realism and reward for player success. I really like that they keep putting notes on the most important things that they're addressing, and that they want to continue to tune it to make sure it fits the game the best way. Now we're on to custom conferences, custom schedules. I know there's been some bugs here. They're going to continue to monitor feedback about these. Based on the feedback, we plan to continue making adjustments in future title updates. All right. I think the EA team wants everyone to know that they are listening to you all. So if you see something you don't like, if you find a bug, it's not the worst thing to put it out, but also be respectful about it. I've seen some terrible complaints where they just didn't convey the frustration in a respectful way. There's definitely a way that you can critique things where it can still be received well. That's what I try to do whenever I point out things I don't like in a game, especially since I do end up working with EA. I don't want to completely tick anybody off, but I'm not going to shy away from things I don't like. All right, they fixed an issue in conference rules where divisions were changed to off even if those divisions were previously turned on. I didn't experience that, but because the conferences are updated to their real life ones, I haven't messed around with customizing them at all. I'm interested to see what was an issue. Apparently, Independence tab disappeared when removing all teams from Independence. I didn't know you could do that. And just an additional note, this also fixes issues with tabs to the right of Independence having incorrect or missing data. They've also addressed UI issues around conference title game for Conference USA and Pac-12. They've addressed issues around Dynasty team select appropriately respecting conference custom moves. And they've updated the text in the team header on the custom schedule screen. All that stuff I just breezed over. I hadn't seen much of. We have Road to Glory next though, and I've done a full Road to Glory playthrough, so I'm curious to see all the things that are wrong. Now, if they wanted to make it perfect, they'd add the ability to spectate plays and also skip over plays, but that's not going to be in this. This is bug fixes. They're not going to change a game's mechanic. And I think the earliest we can expect stuff like that would have to be in College Football 26. That would change the game fully. They've added an additional scenario and NIL content, so there's more in Road to Glory. And they fixed rare issues where you'd get a scenario reward screen that didn't align with your received bonuses. I never saw that. There was also issues where users were getting skill points maxed out after completing a practice. That means you can't max out a Road to Glory player now. And they fixed a crash when quitting a position battle. I didn't ever see that either. Back up to this bullet point though, you were able to get your player to a 99 overall by like week 2, so they had to address that. Anyway, they've reworked wear and tear to show position appropriate rating impacts, but when I did a quarterback, I felt like it was fine. Maybe it wasn't for other positions. They fixed an issue where you can't equip a mental ability during the Road to Glory player creation flow if you enter settings menu during creation. Okay, that's specific. And I feel like I noticed a lot less bugs in Road to Glory than Dynasty, but I've also played Dynasty a lot more. There's an issue where meter mental progress is not tracked during bye weeks. Okay. They fixed an issue where it's impossible to lose coach trust once you reach maximum coach trust, and they probably needed to do that. I noticed once I'd earned the starting job, there was like 0 chance I'd ever lose it again, so I'm glad they did that. They've even fixed a UI issue related to the display of coach trust when a user is close to max coach trust. I didn't see that either. Issue where you can't upgrade your player during bye weeks. I never had that happen, and I upgraded him through bye weeks. But all of these seem to be super small bugs and nothing major. Apparently there was something wrong with the display of weekly energy. There were issues with mental goals not tracked correctly or reaching platinum correctly. And thank goodness they mentioned this. They fixed the issues around text messages that some of them just looked very blurry. It didn't look fully polished. I was so confused when I saw that on the beta. I'm like, how on earth does a 2024 game look like this? So that is probably my favorite thing in Road to Glory. I'm excited about it. I'm glad it was addressed. Fixed an issue where backing out of the team selection step in Road to Glory creation can soft lock the mode. Fixed an issue where a player can continue to work on academics after graduating early. I graduated early and never had that option. Pretty much all those Road to Glory fixes I didn't experience, so that's interesting. College Football Ultimate Team. Do I even want to go through this list? I've played this mode for approximately an hour. I'm going to sit here and quickly highlight all this stuff for you all that do play it, because if there's crashes that occur during kickoff at halftime or something, that is important. But we're going to go through this pretty quick. I'm not even going to read everything because I don't play it, though squads 3v3 could be fun. That's That's the one thing that might get me onto Ultimate Team. There's issues with packs apparently, player profile screens, fixed to crash with house rules, touchdown tango, and those house rule games are also pretty fun. I wish they had them outside of Ultimate Team. Nothing in there really sticks out to me though. We still have presentation fixes as well. I told you all, there are so many bug fixes in this update. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm super glad that they've addressed all this, but I'm also kind of surprised that the game launched knowing that all of these things still needed to be fixed as well. My only thought process is it's better to just get it out when they said they would instead of delaying it for a month. It was still a very playable game, but there's a lot of fixes that they've had to make. I'm glad they addressed it, and they've added new uniform pieces for all of these schools. Okay, that's something I'm excited to check out. Baylor kind of leaked that the whole patch was coming out on Twitter. They put out a thing saying 8-8 patches coming with our jerseys, so that's how we knew this whole thing was coming. And nothing with Kentucky related here. They've adjusted uniform pieces for 2024 season for certain schools. I thought TCU's looked like their new ones. And they've made various improvements to teams' uniform pieces for authenticity. So this just, again, lets me know they're going to update team jerseys throughout the year if they have something that's out there on the field. They've also made updates to the following stadiums like the Holiday Bowl, Texas State. I think they had an upper deck missing. Kansas, I'm pretty sure it got leaked that their whole new stadium that's being built is going to be in the game. And it's nice to see they're fixing stuff that wasn't right. They've also fixed an issue where the USC mascot would disappear during the opening ceremony. That's funny. And there's been an issue where the incorrect mascot would appear during different situations. I've noticed that with Team Builder. Clemson's mascot is always out there no matter what team you're using. They've restored opening chants for Penn State, FSU, and Tennessee on Xbox. Okay, those were wrong. And Road to the College Football Playoffs tier rebalancing and reconstruction, changing the format from 3 tiers to 5 tiers. That's actually super huge. I am excited for that because now you can play with the worst teams in the game. There were still 3 tiers and that was fine, but like UCF versus Ball State, you have no chance to win that. I've been enjoying just playing some online games off camera, so I'm glad that's in there. We've been in all of how passionate you all are about College Football 25, and we can't wait to see your feedback and gameplay. Thank you all so much for your continued support. What school have you chosen to represent? Kentucky. I'm happy with this. This is a good update and patch. I mean, I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting that they've missed and stuff I don't see in here, like there's an issue where when you take over Hawaii, the proximity to home is always F for players from the Hawaii, but maybe it just didn't get highlighted in this and they did fix it anyway. We'll see. Another thing I didn't see anything about was Team Builder, but they fixed so much that I'm going to give them time. There's another patch coming. At least I'd like to think there's going to be more issues that they're going to want to fix. They've mentioned that they're going to have additional fixes coming in the future. And either way, I've been having so much fun on College Football 25 before the patch. I'm sure this is just going to make it even better. And let me know down below in the comments what you wish is changed in the future.